At Izutsu Printing, Section Chief Tsutomu Ishizumi wearily sits at his desk while his boss is heard yelling at a new employee. It has been half a year since the newbie joined, but he's still constantly late, prompting the boss to question how long he's going to act like a kid. The boss, Reina Izutsu, is furious. She grabs the new employee by his tie, yelling that he should stay home if he isn't motivated to work. The other employees gossip about the president's power harassment as Ishizumi looks on. Kenichi Ishizumi, the 37-year-old section chief, intervenes. He informs Reina that it's time for the board meeting and tells her that he will continue training the newbie, asking her to leave it at that. Reina Izutsu, the 24-year-old president of the company, retorts angrily, stating that in the printing business, a delay is a mortal sin and they can't just make excuses for new employees. As she storms off, the other employees wonder how Ishizumi can handle such a difficult woman. Later that night, Ishizumi walks home, reflecting on the day's events. He thinks that while the president is harsh, she's not wrong. He considers her difficult position, having taken over as president at only 24 after her father passed away. Lost in thought, he takes a different route home. Suddenly, Ishizumi stumbles upon a shocking scene. His formidable president, Reina, is drunk and crying on a park bench, wailing that she can't take it anymore and wants to quit and become a baby. Ishizumi is stunned. Ishizumi cautiously approaches her, shocked to see his boss in such a state. He's never seen her drink at company parties and can't believe how vulnerable she is, realizing how much stress she's been holding in. An awkward silence hangs between them as Ishizumi stands before his drunk and disheveled boss in the quiet park. In her drunken haze, Reina looks up at Ishizumi with a blurry gaze, mistaking him for someone from her past. She calls out, "Ah, Tomatsu from middle school, is that you?" She continues to shout the wrong name, calling him Tsutomu and greeting him enthusiastically. Ishizumi, realizing she's too wasted to even recognize him, decides it's best to pretend he saw nothing. Suddenly, Reina starts unbuttoning her blouse, declaring there, in a tone of relief. As she complains about her tight bra and super big H-cup chest, a horrified Ishizumi quickly uses his briefcase to cover her up, yelling at her for doing this in public and giving him way too much information. Reina drowsily says she's getting sleepy. Ishizumi stands beside her, conflicted. Two passers-by notice them, making him even more anxious about the situation. He knows he can't just leave the president in this state. He decides to stay with her and take her home once she's cooled down a bit. His decision to stay seems to have the opposite effect, as Reina suddenly bursts into tears, asking if she's that annoying that he would plunge into the deep right away. Reina starts sobbing into her hands, confessing her insecurities. She knows her subordinates gossip about her for being young, yet acting high and mighty. Ishizumi is stunned, not expecting such a delicate side to his strong-willed president. She drunkenly recalls a time she gave an employee a cobra twist as punishment, admitting through her tears that it was going too far. She confesses that she has a short temper and lashes out when she snaps, but explains that she's just trying her best to protect her dad's company in her own way. She continues to pour her heart out, saying she feels she's not cut out to run the company as well as her dad did, and that she has to be strict because she doesn't want to be underestimated for her age. Hearing this, Ishizumi quietly tells her, "That's not true." The scene flashes back to a previous conversation. Ishizumi had told her that while she's young, her dedication is admirable and she thinks about the company much more seriously than anyone else. He remembers watching her work late into the night, acknowledging how she leads the company forward while bearing the heavy burden of being the president. He had encouraged her back then, telling her to keep moving forward with all her heart, assuring her that someone sees her true efforts. Back in the present, Ishizumi looks at her with a gentle expression and makes a promise. "Because I'll always be the one to support you." His heartfelt words snap Reina out of her crying fit. She looks up at him, blushing and flustered, and asks, "Wait a minute, are you flirting with me?" The sudden accusation sends Ishizumi into a panic. He waves his hands defensively, insisting that's not what he meant at all. Meanwhile, Reina covers her own blushing face, embarrassed and wondering how he could understand her so well when they don't even properly know each other. Stammering, Ishizumi tries to explain himself, looking completely flustered by her question. Reina, still blushing, shyly says that she wouldn't mind starting as friends. This suggestion sends a literal shock through Ishizumi's entire body. She leans closer, slurring that she might even like him. Panicked, Ishizumi begs his boss to calm down and get a grip. Losing her balance, Reina starts to fall forward into him, trying to say his name one last time before she's completely overcome by the alcohol. Finally, after all the emotional turmoil, Reina passes out on his lap. Ishizumi breathes a sigh of relief, thanking God that she's finally asleep. Looking down at his sleeping boss, Ishizumi's expression softens. He thinks to himself, "You work so hard every day, boss." With no other choice, Ishizumi carries Reina on his back through the city night, planning to get a taxi to her house. The scene then transitions to the next day, where Reina's voice is heard shouting Ishizumi's name. Back at the office, Reina is nursing a massive hangover. Ishizumi cautiously asks her a question, relieved that she doesn't seem to remember last night. Reina, meanwhile, complains that she can't remember how she got home and just wants a drink. She asks if the newbie showed up, and when told he was late again, she bluntly orders Ishizumi to punch him, much to his dismay. Later, as Reina sits at her desk, Ishizumi's words from the previous night echo in her mind. "Because I'll always be the one to support you." Though she doesn't remember the event, the sentiment lingers, and she finds herself blushing and wondering, if I go to the park again today, will I see him again? At Izutsu Printing, President Reina Izutsu is chewing out her staff again. While the other employees whisper about how scary she is, Chief Tsutomu Ishizumi watches on with a weary but understanding expression. Reina Izutsu, a young woman who took over the company at 24 after the sudden death of her father. But despite all that, she's still struggling to close the gap between herself and her employees. Tsutomu can't help but think of the drunken, vulnerable girl he saw at the park last night. He believes if everyone could see that side of her, they might feel closer. His thoughts are cut short when Reina catches him muttering and demands he speak up. Reina tells everyone to tighten up and stay focused. Tsutomu, however, is already feeling the strain of the day. Her anger suddenly shifts to a newbie employee, Fujioka. Accusing him of mocking her, she leaps across the room and puts him in a sleeper hold, much to the horror of the other staff. As his colleagues rush to his aid, Tsutomu can only stare, completely baffled by the turn of events. Fujioka, however, seems to have had a strange awakening from the experience. Tsutomu, utterly done with the situation, tells him to close the door. Later that night, after the chaos at the company, Tsutomu finds himself at Mijishi Park. He's worried about Reina, hoping she's holding up and hasn't passed out drunk again. Suddenly, a high-heeled shoe comes flying through the air and smacks him right in the face. He looks over to see Reina on the ground, having apparently tripped. She's loudly complaining that the new hires are avoiding her and the older staff don't take her seriously. Tsutomu finds her on the swings, drunk once again, lamenting how hard it is to be the president. He sighs, knowing this familiar scene all too well. He watches as she swings with surprising intensity, clearly stressed about the morning meeting. He feels like he's witnessing something private, but approaches her anyway. Reina's eyes widen in recognition. "Ah, you're the guy from yesterday, right?" She leaps off the swing and into his arms, overjoyed that he came to see her again. Immediately, she starts venting about another awful day at work. With tears in her eyes, she tells him how sad it makes her that everyone talks behind her back, even though she's trying her best. Tsutomu realizes she has no memory of hitting him with her shoe. He notices a lump on her head, but she mistakes his concern for a metaphorical wound, not a literal one. Back on the swing, Reina continues her rant. She complains about the younger employees being scared of her and the older ones looking down on her. Tsutomu listens patiently, acknowledging how rough her situation is. In her drunken state, she pleads for more alcohol, forgetting that her hands are occupied with holding onto the swing. Tsutomu calmly tells her to please get down. As he sips his drink, Tsutomu reflects on her predicament. Taking over as the founder's daughter with no trust or allies, he can't really blame the employees for their attitude. Just then, Reina asks for a sip of his drink. The combination of alcohol and the swinging motion starts to get to her. She feels a wave of nausea coming on. Tsutomu points out the obvious. Drinking and intense motion don't mix. As Reina's face turns pale, he can't help but wonder how things always end up like this. The nausea passes, but it's replaced by a wave of grief. With tears streaming down her face, she cries out, "Why did Dad have to die? It's all so dumb." Tsutomu listens in silence as she finally confesses her deepest insecurity. "Running a company. I'm just not cut out for it. I can't do anything." She voices her fear of ruining the company her dad left behind, wailing about her incompetence. Tsutomu can't help but sarcastically think that, well, she seems perfectly capable of putting people in sleeper holds. But his momentary sarcasm fades as he looks at her, truly seeing the immense pressure she's under. He always sees her so composed that he forgets she was just 24 when she lost her dad and was thrown into this mess. As she continues to cry, he asks himself, what exactly can I do for her? Moved by her vulnerability, Tsutomu makes a bold declaration to the surprised Reina. I will always be by your side." He reassures her that no one can do everything right from the start, and that it's okay to take things one step at a time. He admits that while he may just be a random passerby, he wants to help. He makes a promise to her. He will come to the park or anywhere she needs every single night, just to listen to her vent for as long as she wants. After a moment's hesitation, Reina's face breaks into a radiant, genuine smile. She accepts his offer, promising to wait for him there every day. Her mood completely changes, and she cheekily asks him to push her on the swing, reminding him he'd do anything. A flustered Tsutomu protests that this isn't what he meant. He gives in and begins to push the swing. Reina squeals with joy, exclaiming how much easier and more fun this is than swinging by herself. As he pushes her higher, Tsutomu feels a renewed sense of purpose. He realizes that for her sake, and for the company's, she needs someone to be there pushing her forward. For the first time, Reina's face is lit up not by tears, but by pure, unadulterated joy, sparkling under the night sky. After a brief flash of memory of the chaotic night, the scene shifts to the next morning at the office. A colleague asks Tsutomu about the bandage on his head, but he just brushes it off, saying he carelessly bumped it. Reina arrives, looking different in a white suit. Tsutomu is relieved that she doesn't seem to remember him from last night. She curtly tells everyone to get ready for the meeting, explaining her usual suit is at the cleaners. Fujioka whispers to Tsutomu that the president is in a remarkably good mood, as she hasn't yelled at them once. As Reina walks off, Tsutomu agrees, though Fujioka feels that something is a bit off. As she heads to her office, Reina glances back and notices the bump on Tsutomu's head. A flicker of something bothers her, but she quickly dismisses it as her imagination. At Izutsu Printing, the young president, Reina Izutsu, is already hard at work. It's been half a year since she took over her dad's company, but she feels a great distance between herself and her employees. While she's gotten used to the work, she worries that she can't effectively run the business if everyone is always walking on eggshells around her. An older employee suggests that to bridge the gap, she should aim to exchange basic social greetings with everyone, taking it one step at a time. Taking the advice to heart, Reina tries to greet her staff. However, her intimidating aura turns a simple morning into a terrifying experience for the employees, who stammer back a greeting in fear. Watching from the side is Section Chief Kenichi Ishizumi. A younger colleague wonders why the boss is pressuring people, even saying he's jealous. But Ishizumi knows better. He doesn't think putting pressure on them is her end goal at all. Reina's attempt at being friendly backfires horribly. The employees whisper among themselves, worried they did something to put her in a bad mood. As she continues her stiff greetings, Ishizumi correctly deduces she's doing this because she's concerned about being avoided, but her intimidating aura is just too powerful. Reina tries to force a friendly smile, but it comes out as an awkward grimace before snapping back to her usual stern expression, much to Ishizumi's shock. Ishizumi gets nervous for a different reason. He knows what Reina is like when she's drunk, even though she never remembers it. Meanwhile, at her desk, Reina wonders why the atmosphere feels even worse than usual, completely unaware of the effect she's having. Just then, a cheerful employee with light brown hair named Hanafuji enters the office, wishing everyone a good morning. In the background, Reina peeks around the corner, her earlier failure making her feel dejected. The mood in the office instantly lifts as everyone warmly greets Hana back. Ishizumi also exchanges a pleasant greeting with her. Watching this easy interaction, Reina's expression darkens with envy. The difference in reception is stark. Ishizumi is stunned by what he's witnessing, while Reina sits at her desk, consumed by a storm of frustration and jealousy. Later, walking home, Ishizumi reflects on the crazy expression Reina had. He muses that both she and Hana are 24, but the reactions they get are completely different. Worried, he hopes she isn't getting dead drunk again as he finds himself near Mijishi Park. And there she is. Reina, completely drunk, is caressing a panda spring rider in the park. She tells the panda, who she's nicknamed German, that it's too cute for this cruel world. Ishizumi spots her. Seeing her in this state, he realizes she's far more depressed than he could have ever imagined. He thinks to himself that there's no going back from this. As she starts pouring beer onto the panda ride, Ishizumi cautiously approaches, asking if she's okay. Reina, clearly intoxicated, begins to ramble about how everyone at the office was acting today. Suddenly, she whirls around and shouts that nobody called her ugly, a defensive outburst to a question no one had asked. This new way of sulking is new to Ishizumi. Reina tearfully complains that everyone said she was ugly and refuses to go back. She singles out Ishizumi, accusing him of averting his eyes from her while being friendly to the cute Hana. In a fit of drunken anger, she grabs another can of beer and declares she should probably fire him, leaving Ishizumi worried about his job. Ishizumi quickly tries to calm her down. He explains that he didn't avoid her because he dislikes her, but because she's the president, and it's only natural for employees to be more nervous around a big shot like her. He continues, trying to reframe her intimidating dignity as one of her greatest abilities as a leader, something that allows her to command an air of tension in the workplace. His words seem to get through to her. A slight blush appears on her face as she quietly asks if he really thinks so. Reina confesses that it's not like she wants to be fawned over, but it makes her feel sad when she gets such weary and hesitant responses from everyone. Looking down with a vulnerable expression, she admits the truth to Ishizumi. She feels jealous. Ishizumi understands. If she were a regular new employee like Hana, she would easily win everyone over. But as the president, she stands above others, and that distance is something she has to bear. Reina seems to accept this, sighing that it can't be helped. Seeing her so dejected, Ishizumi feels a need to encourage her. Flustered, he begins to say that she should have more confidence, searching for the right words to lift her spirits. He then starts to list the reasons why. He blurts out that her eyes, her nose, her entire face, everything is genuinely pretty. The sudden, earnest compliment leaves Reina completely stunned and speechless. Continuing his flustered compliment, Ishizumi adds that he knows it's only been a few days, but he finds her perseverance admirable despite her young age. He struggles to find the right words to express what he's trying to say. He then makes a bold offer. For all the things that go unsaid and unappreciated at work, he will be the one to praise her here, in this park. He hopes that doing so will help her in some way. Ishizumi immediately has second thoughts, wondering what on earth he's even saying. Still, he hopes he can help relieve some of her stress. Reina quietly asks if his praise will truly help. With a hopeful blush, Reina looks up at him and asks a critical question. Does his offer to praise her apply only to the park? Caught off guard, Ishizumi stammers. Seeing his hesitation, Reina presses further, asking if he has something else in mind. Taking a step closer, Reina makes her desire clear. She wants him to praise her on the messaging app, Lime, as well. Shocked, but unable to refuse, Ishizumi agrees. They exchange contacts. Reina admits she's not used to these kinds of apps, but sends her information anyway. With a happy blush, she promises to message him a lot. Reina notices his account name is Zumi and calls it a cute nickname. But then her tone shifts as she playfully warns him that she can get pretty mad if he doesn't reply right away, startling Ishizumi with her sudden assertiveness. Then comes the dreaded question. So, what's your real name? Ishizumi panics. He realizes that this is only happening because she's drunk and thinks he's a stranger. If she finds out he's an employee, she'll stop revealing her weaknesses and start bottling up her stress all alone again. In his panicked state, Ishizumi can't bring himself to say his real name. Reina, misinterpreting his silence, excitedly guesses his name is Izumi. Before he can correct her, a delighted Reina throws her arms around him in a hug, happily shouting Izumi, and declaring that she'll be in his care from now on. Ishizumi is horrified, realizing he's past the point of no return. The next morning at the office, Ishizumi receives a message from the president. It's a plea for him to cheer her on, complete with crying emoticons. Remembering her warning to reply quickly, he frets over what to say, feeling like he's doing something he shouldn't be. As he freezes, his young colleague pops up, asking if he's messaging his girlfriend. In a panic, Ishizumi's thumb slips, and he decides to just send a harmless sticker to get a reply out quickly. Reina hears the notification. At the same time, Ishizumi's loud denial that it's a work message rings through the office, drawing unwanted attention. His hand had slipped, sending a comforting sticker by accident. In her office, Reina opens the message to see a hugging sticker with the words, "There, there." She's instantly flustered, thinking it's a surprisingly passionate and supportive message. Just then, Hannah arrives with documents, forcing Reina to hide her phone. Reina forces herself to remain composed, thanking Hannah and maintaining her boss-like demeanor. But inside, she's fighting a massive grin. She tells herself she can't be seen smiling like this at the office, and decides she'll look at the adorable message again later, all while trying to maintain her dignity. The morning begins with a view of an apartment building, as phone notifications chime. It's a new day for the president, and a new chapter of the story begins. In her bedroom, company president Reina Izutsu smiles fondly at her phone. She's overjoyed that her pen pal, Izumi, always replies so quickly. She blushes, remembering a drunken encounter where she hugged a man in a suit. Reina cringes in embarrassment as she recalls her drunken antics, where she couldn't even remember the man's face. Still, she admits to herself that being able to talk to Izumi about her work struggles makes the stress of being a president feel manageable. In her chat with Izumi, Reina asks for advice on how to get closer to her employees. Izumi suggests that eating a meal with everyone is a good way to get them to open up. Taking his advice to heart, Reina resolves to try it. The scene shifts to the office. As the clock strikes noon, other employees head out for lunch. President Reina, with a determined look, grabs a bento box and gets up from her desk, ready to put her plan into action. In the break room, Tsutomu Ishizumi is about to eat his lunch when he notices the president, Reina, staring intensely into the room from the doorway. Tsutomu, who is secretly Reina's pen pal Izumi, immediately understands the situation. He realizes she's trying to follow the advice he gave her this morning, but is too hesitant to come in on her own. The other employees feel the pressure of the president's intense gaze, feeling like prisoners under supervision. However, their colleague, Shinozaki, seems to find the situation oddly thrilling. Seeing her hesitation, Tsutomu correctly guesses that Reina is just nervous. Deciding to help her out, he extends an invitation for her to join them for lunch. Reina is startled but accepts. Tsutomu worries about how Reina would have felt if he hadn't invited her. To his surprise, Reina proudly presents a bento she made herself, explaining she wants to be a good role model. She shyly admits that she's not a very good cook. As Reina opens her bento box, a horrifying sight is revealed. The contents look less like food and more like a horde of monsters from a video game, stunning both her and Tsutomu into silence. Tsutomu is shocked, thinking it looks like a cooking disaster straight out of a manga. Embarrassed, Reina tries to dispose of the evidence, saying she pushed herself too hard because of his advice. But Shinozaki, ever the eccentric, eagerly asks to try some. Tsutomu stops Reina, telling her not to throw it away. He reframes her effort, saying she worked hard on this bento so she could connect with everyone. Reina seems touched by his words. Steeling himself, Tsutomu takes a bite of the monstrous creation. He forces a smile and declares it terribly wonderful, even as his tongue goes numb, as if he's been poisoned. Seeing his reaction, the ever-curious Shinozaki also takes a bite. Shinozaki has a much different reaction. He cries out in agony, declaring the food is insanely painful, yet he seems to love the suffering and excitedly asks the boss for any leftovers. Before Shinozaki can say any more, a hand swiftly moves in and covers his mouth, silencing his strange request. It's Reina's hand. With a furious expression, she unleashes her metal claw on Shinozaki. Tsutomu quickly intervenes, trying to pull her away and explaining that Shinozaki doesn't mean any harm. Just then, another employee, Shinozaki, cheerfully appears at the door. Unaware of the chaos, she holds up her own bento and excitedly asks to join the lunch group. Shinozaki proudly shows off her own handmade bento. In stark contrast to Reina's, hers is beautifully made, with food shaped like an adorable bear. Reina looks on as Shinozaki presents her perfect lunch. The other female employees praise Shinozaki's cute bento. Tsutomu mentally scolds Shinozaki for her poor timing. Reina, however, looks on with a calm expression, acknowledging to herself that Shinozaki is indeed a good cook. Later that night at Meiji Park, Reina sits alone, drinking a can of beer. From a distance, Tsutomu watches her, realizing that the events at lunchtime must have bothered her more than she let on. As he gets closer, Tsutomu is shocked to find Reina sitting on a bench, completely surrounded by a massive pile of brand-new, boxed kitchen appliances. She clearly went on a drunken shopping spree. Tsutomu confronts her about the mountain of equipment. A tipsy Reina proudly declares that with all these machines, she practically feels like a professional cook already, even comparing herself to Azgok. Embarrassed that he caught her singing, Reina tries to deflect by explaining her reference, telling him that Azgok is a round and cute mobile suit from the anime Gundam. It's a clumsy attempt to change the subject. However, Tsutomu isn't distracted by the anime talk and gestures to the pile of boxes, directly asking what it's all for. Caught off guard, Reina becomes flustered, struggling to find the words to explain the real reason behind her impulsive shopping spree. Leaning over her new rice cooker, Reina confesses the whole story. She explains that she followed his advice and tried to show off with a bento, but it failed miserably, leaving her deeply embarrassed, especially in front of another employee who was a great cook. Reina reveals that her overprotective father never let her near knives as a child, which is why she never learned to cook. She then thinks about Tsutomu, concluding that the only reason he ate her disastrous food was out of pity. Pouting, Reina admits that the thought of him believing she's a terrible cook forever would be too annoying to bear. So she bought all the equipment to practice and prove him wrong by serving him something truly delicious. Tsutomu starts to understand that his actions may have unintentionally pressured her. Flustered, Reina suddenly insists it's not because she likes him. In a classic tsundere outburst, she lists his perceived flaws, calling him plain, stubborn, and hard to get along with. Tsutomu is stunned, realizing this is what she truly thinks of him. Tsutomu tells her that she watches over even the low-level employees like him, a trait she shares with her father. He praises her for bravely challenging herself with cooking despite her lack of confidence, assuring her she did a great job. Reina is touched by his kind words. Beaming with joy, Reina thinks to herself how happy she is to be praised by Izumi. She happily agrees with his comparison, declaring that she is indeed like her father, someone who stands above to look after others. Feeling validated and cheerful, Reina playfully orders Tsutomu to help her carry all of her new kitchen supplies home. A slightly flustered Tsutomu can only agree, saying he'll call a taxi. Later, after dropping off the last box, Tsutomu sits at home feeling guilty for lying to Reina about her cooking. He justifies it by telling himself that his Izumi persona is necessary to help her relieve stress, though he worries what will happen if the secret ever gets out. He reflects that the day's attempt at socializing was a success, reaffirming his decision to continue acting as Izumi for her sake. He resolves to be careful and not make any mistakes. As he's lost in thought in the dark office, he's startled by a sound. He turns around to see a figure in the doorway. It's Reina, who is supposed to have gone home. With a mischievous cat-like grin, Reina playfully says, "I caught you." Tsutomu's face freezes in shock as he realizes his secret might be exposed. He's made a critical mistake. Following the events of the previous night, Izumi finds himself in a precarious situation. He is at the apartment of the company president, Reina, who seems to have him cornered. She suggests they take a little break, much to his bewilderment. Izumi is flustered, insisting that this is all wrong. Reina, looking a bit tipsy, tries to explain that she let her guard down, and now they are stuck. Izumi, however, is adamant about leaving right away, claiming he doesn't have much of anything, which only confuses Reina further. Reina's demeanor changes as she grabs onto Izumi, asking why he's in such a hurry to leave. She wonders if it's because he doesn't like her. A flustered Izumi tries to reassure her that isn't the case, admitting she's pretty. This only makes things worse as she comically misinterprets his words, thinking he's calling her a baby. In her drunken state, Reina clings to Izumi, desperately pleading for him not to leave and to stay with her. Izumi tries his best to calm down the frantic president, but she's not having any of it. She continues to flail about, making it impossible for him to get a handle on the situation. Things escalate as Reina, with surprising strength, takes Izumi down. She pins him to the floor, declaring that she won't let go until he promises to stay with her. Izumi feels like he's about to lose consciousness from the ordeal. Finally, Izumi gives in. Reina is pleased with her victory, while he lies on the floor, completely drained. He reasons with himself that escalating the situation further will only make things worse, so he agrees to have just one drink with her before leaving. They are in a dark room. Reina points out the suggestive atmosphere, but Izumi quickly denies it. As she moves to turn on the lights, he looks on with a sense of dread. Just as Reina is about to flip the switch, Izumi lunges forward and stops her, telling her to wait. A wave of panic washes over Izumi. He realizes that turning on the light would be a terrible idea. They have only ever met in a dark park, so she's never seen his face clearly. If she sees him now, she will definitely recognize him. Reina is confused by his hesitation and asks him to make up his mind. She blushes, thinking that his nervousness stems from her being cute, a thought that makes her a bit flustered herself. Izumi, on the other hand, is struggling to come up with a believable excuse. Izumi breathes a sigh of relief, thankful that the dim lighting will keep his identity safe for now. Reina, oblivious to his inner turmoil, leads him into the room, telling him to watch his step. She decides to turn on just one small light, and they sit down with a can of electric lemon and some snacks. As they sit on the edge of the bed, the atmosphere becomes tense. Reina admits to feeling nervous, and Izumi, holding his drink, can't help but feel that the situation is becoming dangerous. Izumi's mind races. The two of them, a dimly lit room, the nighttime view, completely alone and locked in. Even with his lack of experience in love, he knows this is a bad situation, feeling a strange tingle deep inside him. Izumi is startled as Reina turns to him with a soft, bashful expression on her face. Trying to break the awkward silence, Izumi attempts to change the subject, asking about her work worries. However, Reina completely ignores his question and, with a blush, asks him what his type of girl is. Izumi, caught off guard, can only think about how he needs to change the mood. Flustered, Izumi stammers that he doesn't really have a specific type in mind, trying to avoid answering her direct question. When he mentions a preference for someone quiet and reserved, Reina's eyes light up. She excitedly points to herself, exclaiming that it sounds exactly like her. Izumi is left speechless, questioning the absurdity of the situation. Not letting up, Reina leans in closer, her voice dropping to a seductive whisper as she asks him what part of a girl's body he likes the most, wanting him to say it. Izumi is on the verge of a panic attack. He covers his mouth, trying to stop himself from getting pulled into her trap. Reina, however, seems to find his struggle amusing, coolly remarking that he's just 3 seconds away from turning into a baby. Looking around, Izumi notices that while the room is clean, the kitchen is a complete mess. He puts 2 and 2 together, realizing that Reina must have worked very hard to make his lunch that day. Reina looks at him with hopeful eyes. Izumi, sweating and flustered, seems to have come to a realization and gently touches her face. Giving in to the pressure, Izumi shyly admits that he prefers girls who are a bit soft and have curves, rather than those who are super skinny. Reina is absolutely delighted by his answer. She playfully asks if this makes him happy too, inching closer. Flustered, Izumi tries to steer the conversation back to his worries about her as the president, but she gently shushes him, covering his mouth. The playful mood softens as Reina leans against him, her voice becoming sincere. "I'm really enjoying myself right now," she says quietly. Caught off guard by the sudden change in atmosphere, Izumi can only look on as he braces for what she might say next. Reina confesses to Izumi that being with him, whether in person or chatting online, allows her to drop the facade of the president and just be a normal girl. She admits that thanks to him, her demanding job has become more bearable and that he gives her the strength to try her best. Izumi, however, looks incredibly stressed by this heartfelt confession. Leaning in closer and embracing him, Reina delivers her most vulnerable confession yet. "If you're not here, I can't do it." Izumi is left in a state of shock, completely overwhelmed by her words. Izumi stammers, trying to downplay her confession by saying he hasn't done anything significant. But Reina, with a determined and sultry gaze, interrupts him, simply saying, "Tonight." As Reina suggests they stay the night together, Izumi suddenly feels a sharp, unbearable pain in his chest. He initially wonders if it's a pang of guilt for deceiving the president, but the pain intensifies rapidly. Letting out a cry of agony, Izumi realizes the pain is not guilt, but a severe stomachache. He clutches his stomach, wondering if it's something serious, leaving a startled Reina to look on in confusion. The stomach pain proves to be too much, and Izumi makes a mad dash for the toilet. A concerned Reina calls out to him. Inside, as he suffers, he has a horrifying flashback to the monstrous bento lunch she had prepared for him earlier. The next morning, Reina is filled with regret. She feels she went overboard and was too pushy. She worries that Izumi might have rejected her or simply gotten scared and left after his sudden, intense stomachache, despite his attempts to reassure her. Lying in bed, Reina anxiously stares at her phone. She wonders what she should do, as he isn't responding to her messages. Suddenly, a notification pops up, and she wonders if it's from him. Tsutomu Ishizumi wakes up in a panic. He frantically searches his apartment, checking his bags and furniture, only to come to a horrifying realization. His phone is gone, and he must have left it at his boss's place. Standing outside the office building, Ishizumi is paralyzed with anxiety. He was so out of it from his stomachache yesterday that he made a huge mistake. He wonders if the boss, Reina Izutsu, is already at the office. Meanwhile, Reina is at home, looking at his phone. She's worried that if a notification from Izumi appears on the lock screen, her secret will be exposed. Reina's imagination runs wild with catastrophic scenarios. She envisions being branded a pervert, getting fired, and her betrayal causing the boss to lose all faith in humanity, leading to the company's collapse. She wails in despair, overwhelmed by her imagined future. Just as Ishizumi is staring blankly at the building, he's startled by Reina's voice. She asks what he's doing, and he awkwardly claims he was just admiring the impressive building. She dismisses him as being weird as ever and tells him to get to work, walking past him. Ishizumi breathes a sigh of relief, thinking she hasn't noticed anything and that maybe he didn't leave the phone at her place after all. But his relief is short-lived. As Reina walks away, he spots his phone sticking out of her back pocket. A wave of shock and horror washes over his face as he realizes she's had it all along. In the office, Ishizumi stews at his desk, hoping to get his phone back at the park later. He glances over at Reina, who is sitting in her chair, just staring at the phone. He's confused and anxious, wondering why she's just looking at it and hasn't figured anything out yet. Just as Ishizumi is lost in his worried thoughts, a colleague approaches his desk. It's a woman with short black hair and glasses. She calls out to Ishizumi, startling him. He thinks to himself that not having his phone is hard enough, but now his boss is distracting him even more. The colleague introduces herself as Section Manager Yuko Kurakawa. She informs Ishizumi that there's a regular meeting at 2 p.m. and she needs him to do her a small favor. Kurakawa asks Ishizumi to go and remind the boss, Reina, that it's time for the meeting. Ishizumi is hesitant, asking why he has to do it. Kurakawa points out that he's older than Reina, but he still refuses, admitting that she scares him. Kurakawa tries to reassure him, saying that Reina is approachable and won't lash out for no reason. Ishizumi, however, is still intimidated and feels scared. Reluctantly, he agrees to go. Meanwhile, Reina is at her desk, lost in thought. She's cringing with embarrassment as she recalls her bold, drunken behavior from the previous night. She worries about what Izumi would think of her, wondering if he hates flirty girls. She clutches the phone, feeling lonely and wishing she could message him. Holding Ishizumi's phone, Reina feels a strange sense of connection, as if just having something that belongs to Izumi makes her feel like he's watching over her. Just then, Ishizumi and Kurakawa approach her desk. He timidly calls out to her. "Excuse me, President?" Startled out of her daydream, Reina turns around with a wide, beaming, and completely unprofessional smile. Forgetting where she is, she answers in a cute, playful voice. "Yesh? Why, 22 it," as if she were talking to Izumi. Her bubbly response sends a shockwave through the office air. Both Ishizumi and Kurakawa are left utterly speechless, their faces frozen in disbelief and confusion at her sudden change in character. The reality of the situation crashes down on Reina. Blushing furiously, she snaps back into her boss persona, aggressively shouting, "What you looking at, huh?" Ishizumi, flustered, quickly explains that he just came to get her for the meeting. Reina, trying to regain her composure, places Ishizumi's phone on her desk next to her laptop. She then turns to him and calls his name, Ishizumi. With a terrifyingly intense glare that makes her look like a demon, she points at him and commands, "You didn't hear anything. Got it?" A terrified Ishizumi can only stammer out a, "Why yes, ma'am." Reina then turns her menacing gaze to Kurikawa, warning her that she didn't hear anything either. Kurikawa, sweating and stammering, apologizes profusely. Ishizumi thinks to himself that if she finds out he's Izumi, he might as well be dead. The scene then shifts to Wijishi Park. At the park, Reina is hiding her face behind a bench, consumed by shame. She mutters that she's an embarrassing excuse for a woman and just wants to disappear. From a distance, Ishizumi watches her, thinking that this is the most mortified he has ever seen her. As Reina continues to talk to herself from behind the bench, Ishizumi approaches. He calls out her name, Izumi, then corrects himself, "Boss." He asks if something happened again, noticing her distressed state. Still hiding, Reina laments that she accidentally showed her softer side to an older employee, the last person she wanted to seem soft in front of. But Ishizumi reassures her, saying that he thinks that side of her is sweet and cute, and asks her to show her face. Remembering the reason he came, Ishizumi nervously changes the subject, asking if she happened to drop her phone at his place yesterday. The question makes him so anxious that he accidentally splashes the drink he's holding. In response, Reina dramatically rises from behind the bench, holding 2 cans of beer. With a tipsy theatrical flair, she declares, "I am the goddess of this lake." Ishizumi, exasperated, thinks to himself, "Ah shit, here we go again." Sticking to her bizarre goddess of the lake persona, Reina playfully offers him a can of chuhai or a highball, asking if he dropped one of those. Completely done with the charade, Ishizumi bluntly states that it was his phone. Seeing that she won't break character, Ishizumi tries to get his phone back, but Reina insists he must call her goddess first. Cornered and exasperated, he reluctantly plays along with her ridiculous demand, stuttering, "Gigi goddess? I actually dropped a smartphone," hoping this will finally end the charade. After he addresses her as goddess, Reina peeks over the bench, looking embarrassed. Ishizumi, confused by her sudden shyness, asks what's wrong. Reina complains that being called goddess is too embarrassing and suggests he call her high 20ness instead. Ishizumi is completely baffled, shouting that she was the one who asked him to call her goddess in the first place. Exasperated, Ishizumi asks for his phone back one more time. Reina agrees, but only on the condition that he gives her something personal in exchange. He's shocked by her strange demand, questioning what kind of goddess she is. With a shy and vulnerable expression, Reina explains that she just wants to have something that belongs to him, no matter how small. She looks up at him with pleading eyes, asking if that's really so bad. Her earnest request leaves Ishizumi flustered. He frantically pats himself down, realizing the only personal item he has on him is a simple fountain pen. Reina's face lights up, and she immediately says she'll take it. Ishizumi tries to tell her it's just a cheap pen that can be found anywhere, but she is more than happy with the exchange. Reina holds the pen gently, a soft smile gracing her lips as she admires her new treasure. The sight of her reminds Ishizumi of his own forgotten item. With a cheerful okie dokie, Reina happily hands the phone back to Ishizumi. He breathes a huge sigh of relief, thanking her profusely for returning his lifeline. Reina assures him that she respects his privacy and didn't look at anything. However, she admits she kept checking if it vibrated, but it never did. While Ishizumi is relieved, he's also struck by a wave of depression at his empty inbox. With a playful, teasing smile, Reina adds that if his phone had been buzzing with messages, she would have started worrying that she had competition. She turns and looks at him over her shoulder, her expression soft. "But it's a good thing," she says, "'cause it looks like you don't have a girlfriend." Reina mentions she has an early day tomorrow, but shyly asks if they can see each other at the park again. Ishizumi, still processing everything, agrees. They part ways under the streetlight. Later that night, Ishizumi sits on his bed and checks his phone, only to be met with a barren notification screen. He scrolls back and sees his last message was from 2 weeks ago, making him question if he's truly that much of a loner. He realizes the only person he interacts with daily is his boss, Reina. Looking at a poetic message from her, he reflects on her earlier comment about him not having a girlfriend and wonders if what he's doing is really for her own good. Meanwhile, Reina is lying in her bed, a look of pure contentment on her face. Next to her on the pillow isn't her phone, but the simple fountain pen she received from Ishizumi, a treasured token from their evening encounter. The chapter begins with Reina Izutsu in the midst of a vivid dream. Her online confidant, Izumi, confesses his love for her, saying he can't hold back any longer. Overwhelmed, Reina agrees, asking him to hold her tight. The dream intensifies, with Reina shouting Izumi's name and begging him to be with her. But reality quickly sets in as she jolts awake, realizing it was all a dream. Annoyed but flustered, she gets out of bed, telling herself she has to get ready for work. In the shower, Reina reflects on the steamy dream she just had. She wonders if she's becoming a pervert, as she seems to get more attached to Izumi every time she gets drunk. Still, she figures it's much better than having nightmares. Reina's thoughts drift back to the past. She remembers having frequent nightmares when she first took over the company, plagued by stress and anxiety. But ever since she met him, her online friend Izumi, she hasn't had a single one. Meanwhile, at the office, Tsutomu Ishizumi, the real person behind the Izumi persona, checks his phone. He sees a series of messages from Reina telling him about her dream and eagerly asking if he's ever dreamed about her too. Ishizumi sighs, feeling the weight of his double life. It all started as a way to give advice to a stranger, but now the chief, Reina, constantly messages him, completely unaware that her online confidant is her own subordinate. He wonders how long this charade can go on. He decides he needs to come clean before she finds out on her own, and everything falls apart. As he begins to type out a confession, his junior colleague, Fujioka, suddenly appears and peeks at his screen, teasingly asking if he's messaging his girlfriend. Startled and panicking, Ishizumi completely loses his balance, sending him and his chair tumbling backward with a loud crash. Fujioka cheekily remarks that Ishizumi didn't need to get so worked up. On the floor, a flushed and mortified Ishizumi wonders if his overreaction was because the pain made him feel something else. Ishizumi gets back up and sternly asks Fujioka if he saw what was on the screen. Fujioka nervously denies it, but Ishizumi gives him a look of intense disbelief, warning him not to lie. Fujioka, sensing the danger, quickly changes the subject. He tells Ishizumi that he's acting weird and informs him that he's fixed the progress bar on the cloud, asking him to check it. Ishizumi, still annoyed, reluctantly agrees. As they settle into their work, Fujioka notes a change in his senior's behavior. He points out that Ishizumi is always on time nowadays, unlike before when he used to be late every day. Fujioka correctly guesses it's because the chief stopped beating him up. The conversation about the chief continues as their colleague, department head Kurikawa, walks by. Fujioka mentions that everyone has been saying the chief has gotten really kind lately and asks Kurikawa if she thinks something might have happened. Ishizumi quietly listens in. Kurikawa explains she needs to deliver reports to the chief. Seeing a chance to avoid the task himself, Ishizumi asks if she can handle it. However, Kurikawa immediately refuses, admitting she's still terrified of the chief. Kurikawa then brings up the smile the chief gave them the other day, her expression filled with wonder. She asks Ishizumi what he thinks about it, recalling how uncharacteristically happy and gentle Reina looked. The topic of discussion around the office has been about how approachable the chief has become. Kurikawa theorizes that an evil person couldn't smile so genuinely, wondering if Reina is finally starting to open her heart to them. Ishizumi silently considers this possibility. Kurikawa's statement is overheard by Reina herself, who is standing nearby. Hearing her employees talk about using each other as human shields to face her, Reina is shocked to realize just how fearful she made them. The scene shifts, showing Reina in a car, back to her usual stern chief persona. She discusses business matters, stating that they need to raise their share of sales in the products and promotions section. Back in the present, a motivated Reina decides to act on what she's learned. She directly approaches Kurikawa to discuss the meeting reports. The sudden communication shocks Kurikawa, and even Reina is surprised at her own forwardness. Reina silently wonders what happened to the Kurikawa who was previously too scared to talk to her directly. The memory of another employee reporting a malfunctioning toilet indirectly through a colleague serves as another example of how much her staff avoided her. Reina praises Kurikawa, calling her a talented woman whom she respects for becoming a department head at such a young age. Kirikawa is flustered but thrilled by the compliment, seeing it as an opportunity to get closer to her boss. Reina, meanwhile, feels she must seize this chance. Determined to be more approachable, Reina tells herself to smile. However, her attempt comes across as a menacing, almost evil grin. Kirikawa freezes, misinterpreting the gesture as mockery. The attempt at bonding backfires completely. Reina is flustered and frustrated that she had so much more she wanted to talk about. Kirikawa, convinced the chief is a horrible person after all, quickly makes an excuse to leave. Later, as other female employees invite a reluctant Kirikawa to lunch, Reina watches from a distance, wishing she could join in. Kirikawa hesitates, seeing her colleagues as a mix of a firm boss and highly feminine kohai, feeling like she wouldn't fit in. Ignoring her hesitation, the cheerful employees grab Kirikawa and drag her off to lunch. As they leave, Ishizumi watches the scene from his desk, his expression unreadable as he processes the complex social dynamics of his office. Ishizumi listens as his colleagues Fujioka and Kirikawa remark that the chief has gotten kinder and more approachable lately. However, Ishizumi internally disagrees, believing that on a fundamental level, Reina hasn't changed at all. He reflects that Reina has been an affectionate person from the very beginning. It was the immense pressure of suddenly having to manage a company, combined with her naturally awkward demeanor, that caused so many misunderstandings between her and the employees. Walking home, Ishizumi feels his role as the anonymous Izumi is coming to an end. Reina's relationships at work have drastically improved, and she's even building friendships. He believes the stress on her will ease, and she won't need him anymore. But his quiet contemplation is shattered when he stumbles upon a shocking scene in a park. Reina, completely drunk and passed out on a children's slide, begging for her pain to end. Ishizumi can only stare in disbelief. Lying on the slide, Reina drunkenly hopes she can keep her beauty when she reincarnates. Ishizumi watches from a distance, utterly confused. He'd assumed she had a fun lunch with her coworkers and debates whether he should even intervene. As Ishizumi gets closer, the drunk Reina begins to mutter, "Izumi-san," repeatedly. Then, her eyes snap open as she seems to recognize him, calling out his name with a jolt of energy. Before Ishizumi can process what's happening, Reina launches herself off the slide and tackles him with what can only be described as a perfect spear, all while shouting his name. Now on the ground with Reina crying into his chest, Ishizumi asks her what happened. She tearfully begs him to listen, and he patiently agrees, telling her he's all ears. Reina begins to explain that she had lunch with the other girls from the company. Ishizumi assumes it was a nice get-together, but she quickly corrects him, saying they messed up the conversation. At that moment, Ishizumi realizes that while he can lie to his boss, he can't lie to himself about his feelings. Seeing her vulnerable, tear-streaked face full of trust for him, Ishizumi feels his heart swell with pride. He resolves that he can no longer hide behind pathetic lies for what he pretended was her own good. He gently prompts her to continue, asking what happened. Reina explains that she was trying her best to be honest, so she could connect with her colleagues when the topic of conversation suddenly turned to dreams. The scene flashes back to the disastrous lunch. Reina explains that while her co-workers were discussing their dreams for the company's future, she completely misunderstood and told them about the wet dream she had about Izumi that morning. Ishizumi is aghast, realizing this is far worse than he could have imagined. Reina wails in despair, convinced her colleagues now think she's a perverted woman with no boundaries. Hearing this raw confession, Ishizumi makes a decision. His persona, Izumi, must resign. Reina deserves a life built on trust and true love, not lies. The flashback shows the awkward aftermath of Reina's confession at lunch, where she tried to stammer out an explanation as her colleagues looked on, stunned. Back in the present, Reina's despair turns into a painful squeeze on Ishizumi's arm. He cries out that she's going to break it, trying to reassure her that she's not a pervert, all while getting a mouthful of sand from the playground. This concludes the chapter, with Reina passed out on top of Ishizumi, who is now more determined than ever to end the deception and confess his true identity. At the office, Tsutomu Ishizumi looks over at his sleeping colleague, musing that for men, looks seem to be everything. On the screen is an ad for Obayashi Shopping Park. Ishizumi suddenly recalls that they're currently printing poster ads with the very actor who just got caught up in a major scandal. He looks shocked at the realization. His colleague Fujioka, points to the news article on screen, detailing the actor's 8-way adultery act, and asks the chief for his thoughts, but Ishizumi is stunned into silence. Suddenly, President Reina Izutsu slams her hand on the desk and bellows into the phone. She issues a presidential order to stop the printing immediately. Having averted disaster, a panting Reina gets off the phone. She thanks Ishizumi for his quick communication that saved them just in time, while Fujioka dashes off to contact the production department. After the crisis, a female colleague remarks on how awful the scandal was. Reina dismisses it, saying she's not interested in men like that, which prompts the colleague to ask what kind of men she does like. The colleague presses on, asking President Reina if she has a type. Reina is completely caught off guard by the question, as Ishizumi looks on from the side. A flustered Reina denies having a crush, but her colleagues don't buy it. As they tease her, she becomes lost in thought, admitting to herself that she doesn't really know much about the person she likes. Her colleague exclaims that she basically knows nothing about him. Reina quiets the chatter, telling everyone to get back to work, though her mind is still elsewhere. Come to think of it, Reina reflects, she's always the one venting to him when she's drunk. He's done so much for her, yet she doesn't even know what his face looks like. A hazy image of her faceless confidant appears in her mind. A new determination fills her. She wants to know more about him. With newfound resolve, Reina gets back to her work. Later that night, Ishizumi walks home, thinking he should let her know he's late, but figures she's probably already passed out from drinking as usual. As he passes a park, however, he's surprised to see Reina sitting on a bench, panting and desperately telling herself that she absolutely will not drink tonight. Peeking from behind a bush, Ishizumi is in shock. Why is she sober tonight? He can't understand what's going on. Reina thinks she saw something but dismisses it as a hallucination from alcohol withdrawal. She fidgets, stealing her resolve to meet Izumi sober. Ishizumi overhears this and is stunned, wondering why she's going to such lengths. Reina suddenly runs off through the park, only to slump onto another bench in defeat. She clasps her hands together as if in prayer, at her absolute limit. Ishizumi watches from afar, concerned. In a desperate attempt to distract herself from the craving for a drink, Reina starts jogging through the park at night, even in her work clothes and heels. She pants, telling herself to banish the wicked thoughts, while also acknowledging that running in heels is incredibly dangerous. From the bushes, Ishizumi debates whether he should intervene. But before he can act, Reina gives up and slumps back onto the bench, exhausted. Completely defeated, Reina gives in. She opens a can of beer, sighing that her efforts to stay sober didn't help for crap in the end. But wait, as she rummages through her bag, she declares that the great Reina Izutsu has a secret weapon. Ishizumi continues to watch, puzzled. Ta-da! She triumphantly presents a can of non-alcoholic beer. Ishizumi dryly notes that his boss really does talk to herself a lot. She's amazed, having never had one before. Convinced it's fine since there's no alcohol, she takes a huge gulp. After a moment of stunned silence, a happy little hiccup escapes. Reina's eyes gleam with delight as she declares that it's some seriously good beer. She's ecstatic, exclaiming that even though it's her first time trying it, the non-alcoholic brew tastes just like the real deal and is crazy delicious. Perfect for days when she can't drink. From his hiding spot, Ishizumi just stares, completely unimpressed by her over-the-top reaction. Watching her from the bushes, Ishizumi can only think that her reaction is something else, he supposes. Reina holds up the non-alcoholic beer can, seemingly in worship. But nearby, a can of real beer sits ominously in her bag. From his hiding spot, Ishizumi internally pleads for his boss to just drink already. Suddenly, a tiny angel version of Reina appears on her shoulder, tempting her. It argues that she was a hard-working girl today, and just one little sip of real beer won't hurt. Reina starts arguing back at the imaginary figure. The angel version of herself continues its persuasion, and Reina gives in to temptation. Convinced that one sip won't get her tipsy, she pops open a can of real beer as Ishizumi realizes she's arguing with her own conscience. Without a moment's hesitation, she brings the can to her lips and takes a huge gulp of the real, alcoholic beer. She chugs it down, and after a satisfying pwah, a wave of bliss washes over her. The alcohol hits her instantly and with full force. The empty can falls to the ground. Ishizumi watches in shock as Reina, now totally wasted, finally spots him. With a drunken wave, she slurs, "Izumi, you're finally here." Ishizumi is horrified. His worst nightmare has come true. Slumped next to him on the bench, Reina confesses that she really, truly did try to meet him sober. If only she could have held out a little bit longer. She continues her drunken confession, admitting that she's done too many embarrassing things while talking to him. Thinking about it now, she feels it would be impossible to face him while sober. Ishizumi musters up his courage and asks the question that's been bugging him all night. Why did she want to meet him sober so badly? Because she wants to know more about him. Reina explains that she always forgets half of what they talk about, and even forgets his face. She wanted to have a proper conversation, but was too embarrassed to jump straight into that while sober. Suddenly, a brilliant idea pops into her drunken mind. She looks at her phone, then turns to a terrified Ishizumi and proposes. Tomorrow night, leaving him hanging in suspense. The chapter begins with Reina Izutsu in her pajamas, anxiously looking at a message from Izumi that reads, "Do you want to make the call?" Flustered, she thinks to herself, just 5 more minutes. Meanwhile, Tsutomu Ishizumi is on his balcony hanging laundry, also staring at his phone and thinking, just 5 more minutes. He seems just as hesitant about the impending call. Reina imagines them in a park, thinking that a phone call might be less embarrassing than meeting in person, since they won't see each other's faces. On the other hand, a flustered Tsutomu frets that he's not very good with phone calls. A comical flashback shows Reina holding Tsutomu in a powerful back suplex hold, with him yelling in surrender. This highlights the wild dynamic they have when she's drunk, a stark contrast to their current sober awkwardness. Back in the present, Tsutomu looks at a new message from Reina confirming the call. He anxiously notes that there are only 2 minutes left. Tsutomu is sweating, feeling the pressure. He thinks about how this is the first time he'll be talking to his sober boss not as her subordinate, but as Izumi, his online persona. He continues to ponder the situation, realizing that unlike their usual drunken conversations, she probably won't forget what they talk about this time. He concludes that he needs to be extra careful. His anxiety is palpable as he fidgets, wondering how his sober boss will react to Izumi. He can't shake the weird feeling of nervousness. Suddenly, his phone rings, startling him. He clears his throat and nervously prepares to answer the call. The call begins with incredibly awkward silence and stammering from both ends as they struggle to greet each other, with Tsutomu calling her boss and Reina calling him Izumi. In her room, Reina fidgets nervously, adopting a super formal tone. She thanks him profusely for taking her call, apologizing for taking up his time. Tsutomu asks if she's okay, noting her voice sounds different. Reina internally reminds herself that this is the first time they've talked while she's sober, and then bewilders Tsutomu by formally stating how our company usually operates. Continuing the bizarre formality, Reina bows deeply as if in a meeting, promising to exert her utmost efforts. Tsutomu is completely lost, wondering if he's suddenly become just another business client to her. Reina declares that the conversation has turned into a job interview and asks Izumi to give a self-introduction and a PR pitch to get to know him better. The strange interview continues. After Izumi introduces himself, Reina asks for one strength and one weakness. He states his strength is perseverance, while his weakness is being seen as robotic and lacking emotional warmth. Reina suddenly breaks her formal persona, loudly insisting that he's not robotic at all. She exclaims that he's a really kind person for always listening to her ramble every night, leaving Izumi speechless. As Izumi tries to downplay his kindness as mere stubbornness, a flashback shows him supporting a drunk Reina. She cuts him off, apologizing and asking him to talk to her as he always does. Reina's heart pounds in her chest. She thinks to herself that hearing Izumi say sweet things is far too dangerous. On the other end of the line, a confused Tsutomu asks what she meant by that. Embarrassed, Reina quickly changes the subject, asking what he does on his days off. It's clear they've been talking for a while, as she already knows he likes growing plants, and she's already thinking about having a drink. Reina apologizes, having just noticed they've been on the phone for 4 hours. She remarks that it doesn't feel that long, almost like their usual meetings at the park. While still on the phone, Tsutomu looks thoughtful and asks Reina a probing question. He asks her about his end goal. The question flusters him as he recalls all the times he's taken care of her while she was dead drunk, staying up late to talk to her despite her having a tiring day job. Reina, blushing, asks him directly if he's trying to get anything out of their late-night conversations. Tsutomu quickly denies having any ulterior motives, but then lightheartedly complains that it's actually a lot of work when she gets upset if he doesn't reply to her texts within 5 minutes. But Reina isn't satisfied with that answer. She seriously asks, "But why do you do it?" Her question seems to be a non sequitur as she brings up her own past struggles, saying that during her job hunt, she couldn't land a single offer. Tsutomu begins to answer Reina's question by recounting his past. He explains that during his job hunt, he thought he had completely blown his final interview in front of the company president, but for some reason, they hired him anyway. He continues his story, recalling a time he asked the late president why he was hired. The president told him that while he wasn't good at promoting himself, he had a special talent for listening to others and encouraged him to be there for people who needed to be heard. This advice was a revelation for Tsutomu, making him realize that his ability to listen to people was a genuine strength. Back in the present, Tsutomu tells a captivated Reina that sadly, the president passed away not long after, and he never had the chance to repay him for his kindness. He then compares Reina to his old boss, calling her a hard-working, passionate president who also naturally draws people to her, a high compliment that catches her by surprise. Bringing the conversation back to her question, Tsutomu apologizes for getting off track. He confesses that the reason he listens to her is simply because he enjoys it, and that getting to see and hear from her has made these days the best of his life. His heartfelt confession leaves Reina flustered. As Tsutomu gets embarrassed by his own poetic words, Reina grabs a beer from the fridge and takes a huge gulp. He immediately catches on and asks, "Wait, are you drinking?" Reina, now slightly buzzed, thanks him for sharing, saying she now has a good idea of what he's really like. This sends Tsutomu into a panic, as he worries his secret identity has been figured out. However, Reina says that despite his lovely story, she feels he still treats her with kid gloves. She asks him point-blank if he's not attracted to her, leaving Tsutomu completely stunned. Now fully drunk, Reina stands in front of her open fridge and demands to know his location. She exclaims that he has yet to truly see her up close, and with a blush declares, "That settles it." Tsutomu can only listen in horror. With newfound drunken courage, Reina crushes her beer can and makes a bold declaration. If he isn't going to make a move, then she will become super aggressive from now on. The chapter ends with Tsutomu's terrified face as he hears Reina's final words over the phone. So get ready. After a grueling 4-hour phone call, Reina Izutsu finally manages to say what she wanted. Under the starry night sky, she lets out a sigh of relief. Feeling fired up, Reina declares her new resolution. From tomorrow onwards, she's going to be super aggressive in her pursuit of Izumi. However, her confidence quickly deflates as she realizes she has no idea how to be aggressive, having never had a real boyfriend. Suddenly, she remembers a fortune she received. Fortune will come from an older person of your gender, and with glasses. A new plan begins to form. Meanwhile, at the office, we're introduced to manager Kirikawa, a woman with short black hair and glasses. She's engrossed in reading a new manga chapter, enjoying the romantic tension between the characters, thinking what a sweet gig her job is. Her peaceful reading is abruptly interrupted when Reina slams her hand on the desk, startling Kirikawa. Reina announces that she needs to have a little chat with her. Reina asks Kirikawa to join her for coffee, but her intense gaze makes Kirikawa terrified. She panics internally, wondering if she's being called out for a super serious matter. Just then, their cheerful colleague Shinosaki pops in, suggesting they all get coffee together. Reina, initially annoyed, reconsiders, thinking Shinosaki might be useful. She then declares that this is indeed a very important matter. Reina formally agrees to let Shinosaki come along, which leaves the already nervous Kirikawa even more shocked and bewildered. At the cafe, the three women sit down. Kirikawa nervously sips her drink, wondering what the meeting is about. Reina feels relieved to be out of the office, while Shinosaki admires how mature Reina looks drinking black coffee. As the silence stretches, Kirikawa's anxiety spirals. She fidgets, wondering why Reina isn't saying anything. Her mind jumps to the worst-case scenario. She's about to be fired. Kirikawa mentally reviews her recent behavior at work. Hiding in the bathroom, eating company snacks and reading manga on the clock, but concludes she hasn't done anything bad enough to warrant being fired. Lost in her own world of panic, Kurikawa completely misses what Reina is trying to say. Seeing Shinosaki from sales, she now fears she's being transferred, a fate she feels completely uncut out for. Finally, with a blush and a fidget, Reina asks the question that's been weighing on her. What's the right approach for making a move on an older guy? The question completely blindsides Kurikawa, who can only react with a loud, shocked exclamation of disbelief. Reina, flustered, tries to play it off, insisting the advice is for a friend. Shinosaki is thrilled by the love talk, while Kurikawa realizes this is why Reina wanted to talk outside the office. Kurikawa isn't fooled. She sees Reina's flushed face and knows she's talking about herself. While Shinosaki offers her own expertise, Kurikawa laments internally that she's useless here, having no experience with men herself. As Shinosaki daydreams about a storybook romance, Reina asks why she brought her along. Kurikawa, meanwhile, looks on with a touch of cynicism, thinking how nice it must be to be so carefree. Looking at the vulnerable president, Kurikawa finds this side of her unexpected. She reflects that ever since she started talking to her, she's been seeing a whole new side of her boss. Kurikawa's mind flashes back to her rookie days. She was shy, unsociable, and couldn't fit in, finding herself liking the previous president more. The flashback continues, showing the former president at a company dinner, making an effort to bring her into the group and help her open up. Kurikawa reflects that if it weren't for him, she would have quit. Then his daughter, Reina, became the new president. Her intimidating presence made everyone, including Kurikawa, avoid her. For a moment, Kurikawa even considered switching jobs. Returning to the present, Kurikawa has an epiphany. She sees that in reality, the fearsome president is just a new girl trying to stand on her own. She feels that just as Reina's father once helped her, perhaps she should be the one to help Reina now. Kurikawa realizes that with Reina reaching out for help, regardless of the reason, she can't simply turn her away now. It's her turn to offer support. With renewed purpose, Kurikawa agrees to give her some pointers, much to Reina's delight. As Kurikawa takes off her glasses with a determined sparkle in her eye, Reina feels a rush of validation. She was right to trust her fortune and ask the older lady for help. Though not entirely sure she can help, Kurikawa feels she isn't completely clueless. After all, she has a wealth of manga knowledge to draw from. Putting her glasses back on, she prepares to begin the lesson. All right, President. Ready. Kurikawa, with newfound determination, decides to pour every ounce of her extensive rom-com knowledge into her advice, declaring that when it comes to love, it's all about the chase. Sometime later, the advice session concludes. Reina looks utterly shocked by what she's heard, while Shinosaki seems excited. A triumphant Kurikawa is seen taking meticulous notes, her mission seemingly a success. Back at the now-empty office, Reina heads home for the day, telling her subordinate Ishizumi to turn the lights out before he leaves. Ishizumi decides to wait a bit before heading out himself, a routine that has become second nature to him. As he waits, Ishizumi thinks about how his boss, Reina, seemed to be in a good mood when she left with Kurikawa. He chuckles, thinking about the cute messages his online friend, also named Reina, has been sending him. Just then, his phone dings. It's a message from President Reina. I'm waiting. Ishizumi recalls what his online friend Reina said yesterday about wanting to get super aggressive. He mistakenly connects this to President Reina, thinking he now understands her intentions. He resolves that until she finds the right person, he just has to maintain his act as a good friend she can talk to. He struggles to keep his composure, fighting back thoughts of his alluring online friend. He punches himself mentally, telling himself to endure this and keep control, no matter what. Following her message, Ishizumi finds Reina sitting on a park bench surrounded by empty drink cans. She greets him with a cold, "You showed up again today, huh?" leaving him completely baffled by her sudden and drastic change in mood. Putting her newfound knowledge into practice, Reina looks at a stunned Ishizumi and begins her lesson. Boss, listen closely. Just throwing yourself fully at someone doesn't always work. In the background, Kurikawa is seen giving this exact advice. The scene flashes back to Kurikawa's advice session, where she explains that being too forward can actually backfire and turn guys off. The revelation leaves Reina in a state of shock. Back in the present, a confused Ishizumi asks Reina if something is bothering her, mentioning she seemed fine when she left the office. The scene cuts again to Kurikawa sagely explaining the wisdom from her manga. Sometimes you need to retreat to make the other person think they should be the one making the moves. Instead of answering, Reina simply turns away with a blushing, pouty humph, adding to Ishizumi's confusion. The chapter ends with Ishizumi standing alone in the dark, completely dumbfounded and wondering what in the world is even happening.